What's going on, YouTube? There's a billionaire. His name was Wayne Huizenga. He's since passed. He passed away a few years ago, and he was known for his incredible work ethic. And he's got an interesting background too. We'll get to that in a second. But he used to always say, "No one ever drowned in their own sweat." And I love that. I love that quote because it tells you that we've got a lot of capacity to work harder. And here's the thing, guys. This is what we really got to realize is that most people don't work very hard. And in my opinion, actually, forget that. Not my opinion. For me myself, I've always used my work ethic as my competitive advantage. Right? There's some people who are smarter. There's people who are really talented. There's people who have family connections. There's people who have family money. There's people who start off and get great jobs right off the bat, and they're flush with cash. So you're competing. The thing about the world is that the world is not equal. Life is not equal. When we're young, we're taught, hey, everyone starts the same way. Everyone's got the same 24 hours, but that stuff's not true because it's not equal at all. And as you get older, you start realizing that it's not. So when you get out into the real world, you're competing against you're competing against everyone else, and there's a lot of people with serious advantages. Okay, and that's tough. So for example, if you're starting a business and you're competing against a guy who or a girl who's got deep pockets or got connections to money or has family money or something like that, that's tough to compete against, right? When I was kind of getting started, and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have family money, family connections. I didn't have money. I was deeply in debt. I mean, you know my story. So I I thought the only thing I have, and that's not. I don't mean it to sound negative because it's probably going to sound negative. But I said the only thing I have right now is I can work hard. I can outwork everyone. I mean, that's the only thing that I had. And so I figure I'm like, okay, well, if everyone else is working, 8 hours a day and taking a lunch and, coming in at 9, leaving at 5, then I'm going to work through lunch. And that actually I just thought of a story. I'll tell you an interesting story too. I'll work through lunch. I'll come in a little bit earlier. And I never was one who started real early. I tend to be work later into the night than getting up early. But I would do that. I would make more calls. I would work longer hours. And I just figure, hey, if I work harder than everyone else, then I can get ahead that way. I worked with, I was 23, I think I was at the time. A long time ago. I'm 44 now. I'm about to be 45. And I worked at a mortgage company for about a year. And I worked with a guy who did really well. And it was interesting because he used to, and I was friends with him. I sat next to him, and he was older. He was older than me. I was 23. He was probably in his 50s, and he did really well. He had a background in car sales, and then he found out you can make a lot of money in mortgages. So he got into the mortgage business. So anyways, I was heading out to lunch one day, and a lot of the guys from the office would go out to lunch all together, go to like a local restaurant. I would usually cruise home because I think I lived probably like 15 minutes away. So I would usually go home, grab a sandwich, come back. And I noticed he wasn't going anywhere. So I said, Jerry, are you going getting something for lunch? What are you doing? He's like, no, I packed a lunch. I just sit here and, just eat my lunch at my desk. Well, I'm like, okay. So I was talking to him like, I don't know, the next day, a couple days later. And he said, I sit at my desk, eat my lunch, and the whole office clears out, right, for lunch. He said, so if the phone rings, I answer it. And he said, once a month, like out of all the calls that come in, he said once a month, or he said, not once a month, he'll get one deal a month just off people who call in during lunchtime when he picks up the phone. And I thought that was interesting. And you got to understand that the deals on the mortgages at the time were, a few $1,000s. So it wasn't insignificant. It's not like he was sitting at his desk for lunch for an extra couple $100s a month. It was a few $1,000s a month. And I'm like, gosh, that's really interesting. And again, you know, was he a talented guy? Yes, he was. He was actually really talented. He was really good. He was really good at his job. But even if he wasn't, okay, um, actually, I'll go a step further. I wasn't really talented, but you know what I did do? You know what I did do well? I worked hard. Well, God, that sounds cliche. What I did do is I made more calls than anybody else in the office, more phone calls. No one was even close. We had call logs at the end of the month, each month, that the managers would review, and no one was even close to me as far as how many phone calls I would make per month. And I wasn't the top producer in the office, but I was in the category of the top people, because I would just make more phone calls. But I wasn't talent. I wasn't more talent. Like, there was guys that were really, really good. I would just call people up, talk to them, and then I would get deals out of that way. But like going forward, when my, now my now wife was my girlfriend at the time, got pregnant, and I was, kind of just starting my business, kind of trying to get off the ground. I just said, hey, the only thing I got is my work ethic. That's the only thing I can do differently than anyone else, and it worked. It worked for me. And so it was interesting when I read that by Wayne Huizenga, some years back. I thought that was real interesting because he was known to have a very strong work ethic, and he would say the same type of thing. He would say, we're not more talented than the other guys, than our competitors. We're not smarter than our competitors, but we'll work harder than our competitors. And I think that's a good attitude to have, because maybe over time you can get smarter, and over time you can get better, and over time you can get more talented than other people. But to start, you might not be, and that's okay. That's not being negative. That's just dealing with the reality. I tell my kids all the time, hey, you know what? People will say, oh, you shouldn't judge people by, their looks. You shouldn't judge people by this. But guess what? The world does judge you. So I tell my kids all the time, you got to deal with the world the way it is, not the way people want it to be or the way you want it to be. You got to deal with it the way it is. So we'll wrap on that. Is the fact that, hey, in 2025, or 2026, 2027, 2028, whatever it is, guys, work harder. Work harder, because you know what? That alone, until you get smarter, until you get talented, more talented, until you have more money, until you have more connections, working harder alone will get you ahead.